you're not really going to have to deal much with earnest money and escrow money disputes either. Most of that will be handled by a court, and there's a process to deal with that with the interpleading process, so that it's not ever really going to go to E&O. I mean, I can't remember one time where an earnest money dispute ever went to E&O. So some of these things are theoretical, that they really could happen. And legally, E&O says, yeah, we're going to deal with this. But most of these aren't really going to happen with E&O. They're going to happen with a court. And they're probably not going to involve you or the company. They're going to involve the clients, unless you've done something that we drop back to what Colin said at the start, which is basically fraud or misrepresented something. Then you're going to be dragged into it. The court, the company's going to be dragged into it, and E&O is going to be dragged into it.
So Consumer Protection Act, the reason I was kind of skipping over it a little bit is it's basically just any consumer protections if you are in a lawsuit and you are, and they're protecting the consumer in real estate as they would in the broad commerce area. So any protections for consumers in the commerce would also apply here. So this probably is not going to come up very much, because if you enter into a lawsuit, it's probably going to be one of these other reasons. They're saying unfair competition. That might be an area where, say, you have multiple offers and they might think that you weren't fairly representing all the offers, things like that. It's probably still not going to necessarily fall under Consumer Protection Act. It might fall more under misrepresentation or breach of duty is more likely where it's going to fall. And misrepresentation regarding the value of the property. As we all know, everyone wants to get the most that they can for their property, and sometimes they'll say that they were promised this and it was that, or the other way around. They say that their agent listed the property for too little and they could have gotten more, and they can try to come after you for that. So the key is it's never your decision, right? So this is where we go through these 10 things, but what we really want to do is talk about how to avoid any of them. So,
and the misrepresentation of the value, it doesn't even have to be your client. Like, Bobby had a classic story from a long time ago that resonated was, two people at a cocktail party, and one of them is a real estate agent. And some lady comes up to him and says, oh, I want to sell my house. How much do you think it's worth? And the person just flippantly says, it should be about $575 in that neighborhood. And the person says, okay. So they sell it for sale by owner, and they list it at $575, and somebody buys it immediately. And then the appraisal comes back and let's say $675, and the person's pissed because they gave their house away, and they sue the real estate agent that they had the conversation with at the cocktail party because they told them the house was worth $575, and they won. So it doesn't have to be misrepresentation during a transaction, really, or with a client. You can be sued, and E&O probably jumps into this, I don't know, for something as simple as something you say about the value of someone's property at a cocktail party. So you want to be really careful of what you say about, say, misrepresentation of value or value, even if it's just small talk in a situation that you don't think could ever come back and bite you.
So, with that note, now that we've got everybody fully just nervous, this is something that comes up with compliance as well as errors and omissions, is resolving things before the closing date. We get a lot of compliance stuff coming up too, where everybody suddenly is saying, well, I didn't know I needed that form, and always try to get all your ducks in a row before the closing date. Coming and telling us that you don't have these forms signed that need to be signed with appropriate disclosures after the property's already closed, that's going to get you sued. So let's always try to be ahead and make sure you have all your paperwork in order, and when in doubt, ask. Ask your broker team, ask your mentor, ask your buddy sitting next to you at lunch, whatever, in any of the open workspaces or whatever. Ask anybody if you have a question. It's always better to ask, and it's always better to have more forms signed than you need, and you can just dismiss them than Well, we aren't using any of those people. Doesn't matter. We have a financial relationship with them. We have a partnership. It's just as important as a personal interest disclosure if it's your property you're selling. Disclosing relationships, no matter what the beneficiary is, and whether or not you're using those partners or any of that is irrelevant. Whether you're using them is you have to disclose the relationship.
It's federal law. The Tennessee residential property disclosure exemption and those little forms are state law. The form that discloses relationships that our company has with other people giving us money to allow them to be seen by y'all is a federal law under HUD. So it is a violation of federal law not to have these things signed showing that these relationships were disclosed, which is why it's really more important, because it's a damn federal violation. It's not just a sort of local thing. This is a standard procedure required by the federal government across the whole United States. It's not something that Village just made up because they have to deal with Rudy and they want to make sure everybody knows that. This is federal law. It's not optional.
Yes. Well, I had a question from one of my clients saying that these people that are here on this list, they're much more expensive than someone else I can get on my own.
Yeah.
So he said, why do I have to sign this? Why do I have to sign this document? Because I don't really care to do business with any of them.
Well, and that's why we're telling you this, is if you explain it to them the same way we have just explained it to you, is we have to disclose this relationship, and whether or not you use these people has nothing to do with the fact that I have to show the federal government, if they come and audit us, that I have disclosed this relationship.
As soon as you tell people it's federal law, they stop bitching about it. As soon as you say this is a federal law, it's a federal regulation, it's not something we made up. I realize it sounds silly since you're not using them, but we have to do this, it's federal law. They don't really ever say anything back except where do I sign?
So yeah, the objection handling to the trusted service providers form is.
There are objections out there.
Oh yeah, I hear it all the time. And they say, well, we've already closed, do I have to make them sign it? And I say, yeah, you do.
No, I did before.
You should always do it when you're executing your listing agreement or when you're executing your buyer representation agreement. You should always just get it done up front. Then you don't have to go chasing after people for it later.
And with the property disclosure or the exemption, that state law, and this is like if Trek audits Village or any company, there's two things they really care about. We don't hold earnest money anymore, so they don't care about that. But the Tennessee Residential Property Disclosure Form is required by state law to be signed by the buyer, obviously the seller too, but the buyer, before binding the contract. So that has to be signed under state law before the contract is bound, so that the buyer certifies that they know whatever's wrong with the property or what's not wrong with the property. So, when I started out, hell, we get that signed the day before closing, nobody cared. But it's state law that it has to be signed before binding. And when they do an audit of the company, they will pull that form up on the transactions and look at the date of the signature, and you get fined big time, the company does, if the date on that form is not prior to or simultaneous with the binding.
And I'm going to show everyone, in case they don't know, how to get your seller to fill out the property condition disclosure via transaction desk, so you don't have to manually do it and scan it. So I'm going to pull that up for you guys in a little bit when we get to that one. The source of the source. You guys all heard this in Jumpstart as well. How many of you direct your clients to the FEMA flood maps? How many of you direct them to crime mappers, great schools, all areas you want to avoid? No steering, no fair housing violations. Be the source of the source. You give your clients the websites, the data they need to make their own decision, but you cannot steer them in any way, shape, or form. So, and when they ask legal questions, don't try to play attorney, don't try to play lender. Always, one of my favorite instructors around the city, one of his phrases that he always uses is, stay in your lane. And at the end of the day, real estate is your lane, lending is not your lane, structural engineering is not your lane, inspecting is not your lane. All these things need to be left to the professionals and keep you out of trouble.
Or the client, in that, I frequently was, how do I find out if this property's in the flood zone? And my answer was, frustratingly enough, you don't. You tell the client to figure it out, especially if it's a buyer, and let you know. And the answer I got back was, well, it's my job to help them. And it's not really your job to help them. It's your job to list properties, show properties, write contracts, negotiate contracts, remove contingencies, and anything beyond much of that is not really your job. You're going outside of your lane, as Colin said. But you can look up whatever you like, and I see people in the room I've told this to. And as long as you don't tell anybody what you found out, it's fine. Just don't tell your client what you found out, or don't tell anybody else. And just because a property was not in a flood zone, the people selling it did not have flood insurance, it doesn't mean it's not in a flood zone now. So you can't just go by what it used to be or what it was or if they've been paying on it, because those things change. And a property that doesn't have a mortgage on it that was not in a flood zone 20 years ago may very well be screwed now, and you're going to give folks the wrong information, which giving folks wrong information, even if you do it with good intentions, is no better than basically fraud.
So yeah, just keep those websites. I keep a whole list of bookmarked websites for me to send clients when they want to know questions that I can't really answer for them. And so it's always a good idea to use those. Agency relationships, you guys all know this too, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but you need to disclose your agency relationship up front and as soon as possible, especially if it's your listing and you have an unrepresented buyer walking in. Always disclose your agency relationship. Documenting conversations. I get asked a lot of times, does a text count? No. It does not count in the sense that it will not hold up in court. So you have to have email correspondence to hold up in court. You can text the other agent all day long, but you want to follow up anything that you need documented in writing with an email, because texts at this particular point still are not recognized as a form of communication in court. Anything else on that?
Yeah, and I was really bad about this in that, they always teach you in classes that you should just, from the first conversation, you should just be documenting everything. And that seemed sort of paranoid to me. But that said, I've told most of the agents that I've ever dealt with, as soon as anything starts getting the slightest bit squirty, as soon as you feel the least bit of tension, or as soon as you notice that someone is slightly unhappy, whether it's the other agent, whether it's your client, whether it's the other client calling when they shouldn't, you go to email, you don't do text anymore at all. You switch to email immediately, because even phone calls, unless someone's recording it, aren't really very helpful to you, because there's no, other than a voicemail maybe, there's no real, paper trail on that. So you have to go to emails about as fast as possible, as soon as things seem odd. And I will say, you really need to just assume that you are always being recorded. And I know that's kind of bizarre, but about a year ago we were dealing with an agent here, and the lady had started, the client, the buyer, had started recording everybody involved from almost the beginning of the process. And it was kind of a setup, and it wound up in court, it wound up in E&O, and I'm not sure how it turned out, but it was really ugly. And it was on a rehab project over in Woodbine, and it was almost as if she had been planning on this lawsuit before she even put the offer in. But it turned out that it was recorded, agents were recorded. Basically, she had recorded every conversation with everyone she had talked to about it, and almost steered the conversations in ways that she wanted to have things recorded, which I was very careful not to ever say much of anything that made sense. But our agent didn't. Our agent was very helpful, which was a problem. So always assume that you are being recorded, and go to email if you have the least suspicion that things might be on it. Because there are people out there that go for lawsuits, and there's attorneys who just do this and figure they'll settle because E&O will settle usually, and the attorney's cost is too much. So even if they don't have a leg to stand on, they get 50 to 100 grand out of E&O. It's a nice little racket. Yes.
I say Tennessee is a one-party state as well, so there is no.
Yep. No, anyone can record you whenever they want as long as they know they're doing it. It's legal. Yes.
What if we have clients who don't email?
Well, if you have clients who don't email, I guess they're probably not going to be doing electronic signatures either. At that point, I guess you're going to be doing most everything face to face, and you're going to be sitting preferably in the office, not at their house, because they could still record you pretty easily there. But at that point, you probably do want to be doing everything. That's really a rare situation, but you probably want to be doing everything possible face to face across the table so that you can really read them really well and take some notes. I'd do that. I think that's a rare situation, but yeah, face to face and take notes.
I was just going to share everyone a quick tip here on, in case any of you don't know how to share this. So when you have this old school, you would hand it to them and they'd fill it out manually, you'd scan it and send it back, and then you have sometimes illegible things written on here, and given how important this is, we'd like to make it cleaner.
The lines left out that they didn't even answer.
Right. So what you would do is you would email this, and normally you would always send your contracts as an attachment. Not this time. You send it as a link, allow editing of forms, and then you send it. And then Transaction Desk will send you a notification that you've sent it, and as soon as they open it, it will send you another email with a notification that your client has opened the form. They edit the form right there, just like we do. They fill in all the blue areas, and then they save it. That is a nice, quick, easy way to have it clean, legible, and ideally prompt them to fill out everything that's required.
And you don't help
And you do not ever
at all, even if they're blind. I mean, most of the times agents would come back and say, well, they need me to help because they can't see it or they can't read it or the mom is in a nursing home or whatever. It's like there's always some reason why these people can't do it themselves. But we had another one just about a year ago with one of our agents, and she was trying to help. And the guy was out of town, he was a musician, he didn't have time to fill it out. So she went through it and asked him questions over the phone. And then she wrote it all in her handwriting. And evidently she missed one. And it had to do, I want to say water intrusion. It was ugly. And it was going to court. It was like a $40,000 correction. And we had filled it out for the seller incorrectly, saying there wasn't any water problem, and it was closed, and then flooded about a week later. And we got out of it. It was dicey. But we never admitted that we filled it out, and we just kind of forgot about that part. And we got the seller to sort of disappear, and the buyer, I don't know whatever happened, but we got out of it. But it was, you don't help them, you don't ask them questions and write it down for them, you don't touch the damn thing. You can put the address on the top line, and you hit send or link or whatever, but you don't, if they say, what did I put here? I don't know. Then you say, well, there's an unknown box. You fill it out however you like, but I can't help you with the answers. Because they're going to ask you frequently, especially elderly people, to help you with the answers, and you just can't do that. If you do that and it goes to court and it comes out that you helped them, we're screwed and we're guilty.
Okay, so I showed you how to do a little shortcut on getting the property condition disclosure filled out, and then recommending home warranty. I know. Let's just say we know they don't cover half the things, and we know that they can be fraught with disappointment. However, it is our job to recommend. They can always say no. And the other thing is if you have a listing and you can get free coverage during the listing period, we have to tell them that. They can decide not to take advantage of it, but we do have to let them know that that is an option. It's part of our job and our duty to do that.
That's one you would like in an email, in that we had another one 2 years ago, that it was a AC unit on top of the Crestwood, which is incredibly hard to get to downtown. I mean, service people can't even park outside that building. And the lady bought it for a kid at Vanderbilt. The HVAC went out about a month after they closed on it. It was going to be $4,000 or something to fix it. And the lady wanted Village to cover it because our agent had never told them that a home warranty was available, that they even existed. And this person knew of home warranties from Connecticut or California or wherever, and they were asking me, why didn't your agent ever say we needed one? Why didn't they suggest it? We thought they were illegal in this state or something, since they never mentioned it. We didn't know we could get such a thing. And if we'd been told, we would have. So now we want Village to pay the $4,000 to replace the unit. And I didn't have much of a leg to stand on, except that the agent said, I guess I just forgot. And we did manage to, I got an HVAC person there. We had to eat a couple $100. The agent did. Turned out the whole thing didn't have to be replaced. It was a nightmare. I had to go downtown 2 or 3 times to deal with this person. But it all came down to just a simple thing of our agent never said, would you like a home warranty? Because if they'd said that and the person said no, we would have been out of it from the start. And a paper trail like an email is better for that one. Because then they can't say, well, you didn't tell us. And we say, yeah, I got an email that says, and you said no. Yes, sir.
With the disclosure we have with our partners, one being secure, America's first home warranty, would that be considered?
No.
That wouldn't even be.
I mean, well, if the thing from the home warranty that you get signed that says, I don't want one, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
That's even better if you can get that signed.
But just having
But in lieu of that, an email saying, hey, would you like a home warranty? And they say, not wasting my money.
Mm-hmm.
That's better than nothing, and
Okay.
definitely, better than, but even if you say it and they turn it down, if you don't have it in writing, they can always just say in court, well, no, they never said that. There's no proof.
You're asking if the trusted service providers
yes,
form
would that
can.
form-
No,
that's not gonna be
No,
enough.
there was the form that was on the back of the warranty thing that we have, that you
Yeah,
get signed
yeah,
that says,
okay.
I don't want a damn warranty. That would help. But no, the trusted service providers doesn't cover you at all with any of that.
Okay.
What about the purchase and sale contract?
Purchase and sale? Well, that's if you're asking for a home warranty on a listing. We're talking about.
No, as a buyer, right? You're asking the seller to provide one.
Right, you're
that's
asking the
enough.
seller to provide one, yes. And that's a different issue than
And
disclosing the fact that we can provide free home warranty on the listing side.
Yeah, I'm
that does help. Unfortunately, in this situation, neither box was checked on the contract. They
Right.
hadn't refused it, they hadn't accepted it, both boxes were blank, so we were still screwed. That even made it look worse, like we had never explained it or talked about it in the contract, because the whole thing was left blank.
Right.
So that was, but yes, a box check saying I decline would help a lot. That you should, one of those boxes should always be checked in a damn contract.
Agreed.
Yes.
For clarification, do we need to go, hey, I recommend you get one, but you can elect to not ask the seller to pay for one?
Absolutely, and I tell my buyers that all the time. I'm saying, if you want a home warranty, we can look into different companies and all the rest. If you don't want to ask the seller, especially when you're in a competitive situation and you know you're going into multiple offers and you know asking for a home warranty is going to kill your deal, that doesn't mean you don't talk about home warranties. It just means you're not asking the seller to pay for it.
The only time you really should ask the seller to pay for it is if your client's basically broke. I mean, if you've got a buyer that doesn't have enough money to close pretty much, and the home warranty, I mean, I used to do that with your buyers all the time. But anybody who has their own closing costs and money, seller cares about the net. It makes you look weak asking for a warranty, but you still recommend that the buyer pay for their own.
Yeah. Who pays for it being very different from
Right.
whether or
That's nothing to
not,
do.
yeah, whether or not they should get one or have the discussion. Okay, so next year, 2020, be prepared for the RF 712 potentially being required for compliance. It is a form of recommending a home inspection. There are going to be some new radon requirements coming up. I don't know all the details, but I do know that there is a high likelihood that this will be required for compliance next year. So you always want to recommend they're going to get a home inspection. Obviously, if it's a scrape and tear down, this is a different situation, but if they decline an inspection or they want Uncle Bubba to do the inspection or whatever, you need to have it in writing that this was their decision and that you have recommended that they get the inspection. And radon is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. It's always been here, but people are starting to, I think as we have a lot of people moving into Tennessee from other parts of the country, freaking out about radon. And so we are going to have to start dealing with this in a little more proactive way. And so be prepared to start having to try out the RF-712 most likely next year. And if not, yes, in an email or some sort of written correspondence, encourage them to get inspections and talk to them about radon. And once again, what I have done in situations where you know you're going into multiple offers and you're afraid that asking for radon mitigation or radon testing is going to kill the deal, I have been able to tell people, you know, you can always get radon inspections at any point in time. If you don't want to go through all of this right now, if they know there's high radon or whatever, and they just want to wait and do a home test after they close because they don't want the radon to be part of the deal to kill it. But you have to get all that in writing. If they decide that they want to skip a radon inspection and they want to get a home kit and test it later and blah, 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 just get it all in writing that they've chosen that. Yes, Maria?
Is that just for basement homes or?
No, everything.
Every home.
Slabs, anything.
Yeah. Every home really, I mean, there's a little radon everywhere.
So staying in your lane,
Yeah.
I'm not a radon expert, I'm not a home expert, home inspector.
Yeah.
So in the contract, they have so much time to get it, we recommended they do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Your
they
job
opt
is
not to, it's.
Your job is just to make sure that the deadlines are met.
Right.
That's
Right.
it.
And
That's
if
pretty much
they
it.
decline an
And if they
inspection,
decline-
then you have that
Correct.
noted.
In
Any
writing.
kind of inspection?
Any kind of
Whatever,
inspection that
yes.
they decline,
Okay.
then that's
It's
fine.
probably-
So it can't come back on you that you didn't recommend they get an inspection. So say in your inspection, you discovered some potential foundation issues. You know, you can suggest they get a structural engineer and try to get an inspection deadline extension, because let's face it, you're probably not going to make the deadline then.
Right.
But you need all that in writing, that you suggested that they do this, but it's their choice.
And on that one, with structural engineers, you do not want them to be cheap and use the one from the builder who was doing the renovation on the property, like we had in that other lawsuit, because the buyer who I thought was setting it all up and recording everything declined to hire their own structural engineer because they didn't want to pay $400, so they just used the report that the seller provided from theirs that they had used to do the reno. And that didn't help us either, because even though the person declined to do their own, they were still suing the company and the builder, and then they just brought in the engineer and sued them too. So if they really want to do this, they need to use their own engineer, even if there is already one available on the seller side.
I also recommend you don't use an engineer that actually does the work
No.
to fix the job.
Right, no.
You don't want the guy that has the company that fixes foundations. You want a separate engineer who's got no skin in the game except to tell you what their findings are.
No conflict
Because
of interest.
there's no conflict of interest then to say, well, we found this, and we can fix that for you for $5,000. That's not the guy you want. You call that guy after your independent structural engineer has told you what needs to be
And they'll
done.
give you the report, and then you can just show that to the contractor, and the contractor can come up with a bid based off the report, and hopefully go under the house and look at things too. Because the other one we had that was, you know, the contractor just took the report, never actually went under the house and looked at anything firsthand, did the work, came back, and the engineer came back and said, well, you know, half of this isn't finished. So then the contractor came back and wanted another 20 grand. So you want them to not just read the report, they need to actually really crawl around or look at stuff and come up with real bids on it.
And as far as being the source, can you suggest a structural engineer?
I suggest a list of them. I give them a choice of a minimum of 3 names and let them choose. And I will say, I always give them a list of people I've had experience with, But I let them choose because, once again, if I chose the structural engineer, then I put myself in a liable position.
And even encourage them to find one on their own if they like. I mean, and make sure you suggested that here's some people you can talk to, but if you know anybody or you know someone who knows someone, feel free to go get them to do. Encourage them not to use your people if they want to use somebody else. That's even safer.
The other thing, if you haven't had experience with somebody that you're recommending, is I always, once again, I'll put it in writing. These are names I found on a realtor forum that have been recommended by other realtors. I don't personally have any experience with them, but you're just putting that caveat out there. This is where I got this name. It came from a realtor forum where people were asking for sources, and these people were recommended by other realtors. Just to keep yourself protected in that situation. And then that's pretty much, I think, the bulk of what we've got. Let's see. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. You've got everything in front of you. What other questions do you guys have? I know this is super
And I
exciting.
wanted to say one thing. Go ahead. I wanted to say one thing that the other, from my experience over 14 years of being a broker here, every one of the cases that involve lawsuits and E&O insurance resulted from a renovation, gut rehab. There might have been one that was new construction. There are almost always, or water intrusion that wasn't disclosed, but they're almost always a result of somebody who buys it. We really discourage our own agents from doing it. It's the first lawsuit that I was aware of was one of our agents who bought the damn property, fixed it up, flipped it, and it had, a problem with ethos and mold in the walls from the fake stucco stuff, which they hadn't opened any walls. And we lost 75 or 100 grand on that one settling it. Almost all of the other ones, they represented the builder, the flipper, the gut guy who was gonna, and sometimes they were investors who hired the contractor and they bought the property, fixed it up, and flipped it. So in every case that I'm aware of in this company's history going back a dozen years, it was flips that did it, that was the cause of the lawsuit. Which is why I say most of these other things, other than maybe water intrusion, you're probably not going to really see in the real world, even though you need to do everything Colin said and take them really seriously. But it's going to probably come down to a buyer bought something that was rehabbed and something was disputed about whose fault it was that it sucked after it closed. And the main thing you can do to protect yourself when you have the buyer in that situation is you can check this yourself, but I don't like for you to say anything after you do. You encourage the client, if you're showing a property and it's obvious it's even had a little addition put on or a bathroom remodel, I don't care what it is. If it's had something that has obviously been done, even before maybe this seller had it, maybe the seller before did the work, then you encourage your client to check the permit history with Metro codes. And like I said, you can do it just so you know, but don't tell them, I checked the permits and this and this and this. You get them to check the permit history. The permit history, if it's there, will let you know if there were inspections. So if they didn't pull permits and they put in a new panel and they put an addition on the back and there were no permits, then there were no inspections. So when the house catches on fire, if your person buys it and you didn't tell them to check the permit history, then we're going to get sued. And the reason that these people sue us is the contractors don't have the deep pockets, especially if you're using the little onesie-twosie contractors who kind of do one or two a year on their own. They're just going to declare bankruptcy, which is what both of the ones in the past did. They're going to walk away from it, and even though we had nothing to do with the actual construction, we have deep pockets and we have E&O, and they know, the attorneys know, that we'll settle rather than spend 100 grand or 150 grand to win, which we would, but it would cost us more than settling. So having the buyers check permit histories is critical. And something in email where we decided, we checked it, there weren't any permits pulled, there weren't any inspections, we don't care, we want it anyway. I want that in an email where they say they don't care. And I'm not a big fan, well, it can go two ways. If you're gonna get the seller to have an inspection before you list the property, so that you, quote, know what's wrong with it. If you find out something's really bad wrong with it, you've got to disclose it. You can't just forget about that and say, well, nobody knows we had this inspection. Because then you really do have knowledge of it. And you have to disclose anything that you know about. All sellers do not. They can get sued, but especially if it's not on the property condition disclosure, if it's the exemption, they're not really required under law to disclose anything. Technically they should be, but they're not. But you are required under law. I mean, if the seller says, yeah, I know the basement flooded 2 years ago, but hell, I don't have to say anything, I rehab the house. They're right, they don't have to, but you do. And you will get sued. And even if it was the listing before the listing now, that this has been happening, and then neighbors say, oh no, 5 years ago we had a neighborhood lawsuit, we had the city out trying to get, you're screwed. So I'm not as big a fan on having inspections done before listing, and if you are, you better tell the people who want to do this that I wouldn't encourage them to do it, because then if they find something really bad, you told them to find this thing that they now have to disclose, it's screwed them. But if they do it, let them know, if they're owner occupant, that they and you have to disclose whatever you find if you don't fix it, and that could be dangerous.
So you prefer to do an inspection before the...
No, I don't.
No, he's actually
saying
saying
I don't think that's a good idea. If you think there's going to be 2 or 3 little, like a faucet dripping or a plug that's not working on a condo or something, sure. But if it's a house that's on the side of a hill, it's got a couple of cracks in the foundation, and the roof hadn't been done in 20 years, I think I'd stay away from it. There's just more downside to doing this than there is upside.
Pre-inspection for older homes creates more liability
Right.
and disclosure situations than if you had a pre-inspection on a brand new condo. Then that might be taking it next level. You've had it pre-inspected, you can even show that or whatever, but that's really not
I
recommended.
mean, if you do it on a home that's existing, the people better agree and know that they're going to have to fix every damn thing that comes back in that inspection, even if it's structural and it's $50,000, or they better not have the inspection. They just list the property and don't tell. And then if it comes up, then you deal with it later, but they don't know anything to disclose. So and don't ever ask, I don't like asking the sellers, well, do you know if anything really bad has happened? It's just, if they want to disclose it, fine, they fill out the form themselves. But I'd say I prefer not to know, although the court can say that you should have known about things, and that you didn't disclose things you should have known. So if there's huge cracks in the foundation and things, then you probably do need to ask, and you do need to know. Or if there's mold under the house, did water come in here? If there are things that would be obvious that you should have known, then you can't just say, I don't want to know. So you need to ask if things are obvious and then disclose.
Are you responsible if, like, a seller, like, you listen to somebody and they get a pre-inspection without your knowledge, or without,
Not unless they tell you.
Okay, so
If
if
they
they,
never
if they
tell
do
you-
inspection and keep it to themselves,
If
then
you
you're,
didn't look
okay,
at
okay, yeah.
Right,
that's
if you
all
don't
right.
want
and you don't know, and they haven't told you,
Okay,
you
yeah,
don't know.
that's what I
Right,
was
but if you
wondering
know about it, then yes, you are.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was just wanting to double check, because I wasn't sure if you were saying that if they got
No, I said, and you know about it.
Okay,
Yes, that's what I
okay,
meant.
Okay,
Especially if you advise them to do it and they get screwed in the process, they're going to be pissed.
yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna say, you told me to get this
But now I can't
pre-inspection,
sell
and
my
now
house.
I've got,
Yeah, now I can sell my house.
Another thing that I just want to point out that we talked about a little bit earlier, the stay in your lane thing, is I always hear about agents down at codes. Why are they down at codes? What are you doing down there? You're not supposed to be down there.
Well, I go down because, when John was doing his class about the square footage and all that stuff, I was just curious to know.
Curiosity is really good, but the other part of that.
Also,
The other part of that. Like I said, you can find out whatever you want. Just don't tell anybody.
Okay.
Just don't ever say a thing to anybody. anybody. If you find out, like you go to college, you find out something, don't go back and say, yep, you can knock down this house and we can put 2 back on it and you can be rich and I'm going to get lots of money in commissions. You can't, I mean, because then if the person buys it, they can't knock it down for some, or can't put something back on it because of drainage or storm sewer or something that was on the property that you didn't know about. And they're out all this money and they can't flip it and they can put 1 on it and break even maybe or lose money.
Gotcha.
They're going to sue us.
Okay.
Zach?
I mean, is the summary of this just like ignorance is bliss?
Yeah. Unless you know something, then yes, but it is ignorance. Remember, your job in your lane is to list properties, show properties, write contracts, help people remove contingencies, make sure they meet their deadlines, and get paperwork and things to lenders and closing attorneys. We're done. That's it. Anything else is not your job.
There's ways
Makes
to
it
be
easy.
helpful without being liable.
Right.
So at the end of the day, that's the fine line, is how to be helpful and how to steer them to get the information they need without seeming like you're saying, not my job.
And you can
Because
give
you're never going to say that to your client.
No, you don't say it that way, but you can give them the phone number for the zoning department and tell them how to set up an appointment to go down and see a codes inspector. And you can tell them maybe what they would want to find out from the codes inspector. So they can write down their questions and you can help them come up with the questions. But you don't go down there and then come back and say, yeah, we can do this. I talked to the man about it. So yeah, ignorance is kind of bliss. But the other thing besides what I said a minute ago is you can direct them to the people who can help them. Engineers, lawyers, contractors, whatever. And then, but don't go there with them. Like, don't sit there and dominate the conversation with the engineer while they sit there and, just stay out of it after you. I don't even want you there when they meet with the engineer.
Just provide names, at least 3, so they can.
Or 5 or whatever. Like Bobby says, you're still guilty if there are 3 bad ones and then they take one of your 3 and all 3 are bad. They're still, but giving them a list and then encourage them to find whoever they like as well.
How many of you go on inspections?
Oh,
Come
you
on.
don't, come on.
I don't.
Sometimes open the door.
Yep, open the door and show up at the end and don't say anything.
Yeah.
And they talk to the inspector, they say, which agents always say, well, my client doesn't understand any of it. Say, well, then they should call the inspector and ask the inspector to explain it to them. And if they want to be really on top of it, they'll take off of work for a few minutes and go meet the inspector at the end of the inspection. And preferably it's an inspection that's there, not one you go to a link on a week later. And you say, okay, what is this? Show me these pictures. Show me this list of items. I'm not going to crawl into the house maybe, but try to explain what you're talking about. But it's the inspector's job to explain what the inspection means to the client, not yours. And you should never even have a copy of it. You should never even have a copy of the inspection in your possession.
But they won't listen to it.
You don't. You really don't have to.
Well,
You tell the inspector, don't send me a copy, send it to the client, and then you tell the client, send me a list in an email of the things you want me to ask the seller to fix. You don't sit down with them and go through it and say, you should do this means this, oh, that's not a problem, it probably won't leak again. You don't do any of that. The inspection goes to the client goes through it. If they have questions, they call the inspector, they get their questions answered, they come up with a list, and I usually say, put it in the order of importance, like the most important thing to the least important thing. And then when you send it to me, don't say, see inspection report, because the seller's not going to have the inspection report.
and they don't want it either.
And they don't want it, and you don't want to send it to. They have to write sensible little sentences. 1 dot blah blah blah. 2 dot blah blah blah. And it can't say see inspection report page blah. And it should be really careful. You tell your client to be really careful with words like repair versus replace, because they're very different. And if they write in here, repair floor joists that are bad under back bedroom, and the people come in and put in sister joists next to the old rotten ones, which is fine, from a contractor's point of view, and the inspector comes back and says, well, they were supposed to take the old ones out. Well, it didn't say replace, it said repair. And so the definition or the meaning of simple little words can wind up being things that go to court. Who meant what? If your client emails it to you and it's the wrong word, you're not responsible for typing up the list yourself. You just cut and paste it onto the damn form and hit send.
I always encourage my buyers, if for some reason they can't be at inspection, then we have to reschedule or whatever, because I want them there face to face with the inspector getting the summary on site. So if they have any questions, they can go to that corner of the house where he's just taken the picture and can ask the question of the inspector, not me.
And if they're not local and they're in California or something, they can't do this, then you still stay out of it. You don't go back afterwards except to lock the door. The inspector sends the report to them in California, and they can sit there and go over it together on the phone and come up with the list. Just because they're not local doesn't mean you go pretend you are the client, because they can't be here.
They can FaceTime,
Whatever they want. Fine.
FaceTime is a great
That
way
is,
to do
yep.
it. I've done that before. I've done a FaceTime inspection, and we sat there and we went through the whole thing, and all I basically did was hold up a phone.
That's it.
Yeah.
But that's
But you don't
definitely
comment,
way to do it.
is that rotten or not? I don't know. It's like, can you tell from California?
Yeah.
You don't start interpreting anything. And I was a contractor for like 18 years, so I can sit there and know exactly what's going on. But God still didn't say it.
All right, any other questions? Have we made you all thoroughly afraid to do your job now?
You should feel better. You should feel better because now you're probably not going to get sued if you follow this stuff.
It's gonna be great at my inspection, 1:30.
Yeah, see,
Just unlock the door, come back when it's over.
Actually, I can't make that inspection anymore. Go ahead and let me know how it is.
Yeah.
Send me what you want fixed. I'm gonna get the office.
That's it. Send me a list in an email.
The inspector has to send your card.
That's right.
What was your question? Stephanie?
Website, you said Great Schools, Crime Stopper, and something else.
Crime mappers.
Micros, yeah.
Crime mapping will show a neighborhood, and it'll show, you can filter out by which kind of crime. Everything from petty theft to aggravated assault and,
National.gov's got a lot, everything from crime to zoning to, if you go into national.gov schools, you give that to the clients and they spend a little time in there.
Okay.
They can find most everything they ever want, flood maps and everything is in national.gov.
And the schools thing, greatschools.net is only one of many sources, but what I always encourage people to do, and I imagine Tyler, when you have your class or you're moderating on Thursday, this may come up, I always encourage buyers to go and visit a school themselves. Because no data is going to tell you what the vibe of the school is if it's going to fit their children, and that's not our business. And so I always say, any schools that you are interested in, I encourage you to go take a tour and pay a visit in person during school hours. See how the kids interact.
Schools like it when people do that. They like that.
Yeah, they encourage it and we encourage it. So I always, I say, yes, you can use greatschools.net, but I've seen a lot of really good schools marked children, which have some low test scores or something that skews your data in a way that doesn't give you a sense of whether this is going to be a great school for this particular child or not. It's not for us to judge, and the data can sometimes, I think, be very misleading.
It's kind of similar to nursing homes. Really rich ones aren't necessarily great. If there's no staff there, it doesn't matter how nice the curtains are.
Yeah,
I'm
so
serious.
go check it out in person, and once again, be the source of the source. Say, hey, this is a list of the schools, both private and public, that are in the area you're looking at. I encourage you to go visit all of them. Do not make a recommendation. I've been able to say, yes, I have children in schools, this is where my children go, but you have to make your own decision. Just because I sent my kids to school, that doesn't mean it's the right fit for your kid. The last thing I want to do is steer them to a school and get sued somehow if they have a horrible experience. So it's just another way of kind of staying in your lane and being the source of the source. Yes, Ed.
How many village agents have been sued in 2019?
In 2019?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of it.
Ballpark.
If you count starting the lawsuit in 2019, I don't know. I'm not aware of any.
Um,
But there could be. But I know
There's a lot of game left.
18 was a couple, and they go on a while. they go on like a year or more. They don't just end up really quickly. So 18 was, I think, a couple. 17 or 16 had one or two.
We had a fair housing complaint that went away because it was unfounded. We were able to get that dismissed.
And you get in Tennessee real estate, I mean, you get those complaints filed. That's different than actually a lawsuit. That's just getting something filed with the real estate commission, which isn't nice either, but it's not the same as going to court.
So far,
It's
to
not
my
even
knowledge, we haven't been deported all this year.
You know that
Well,
anything
man,
you do.
last year, right? Thank you. But, yes, we have had one fair housing complaint, but we had it dismissed. Anything else, Charles?
To your question, are we allowed as realtors, like, let's just put it that way, are we allowed to wholesale as, actual realtors? I mean, I'm curious, yeah.
Well, first of all, realtors is like an organization designation. It doesn't mean like
Yeah.
affiliate brokers would be what you're really talking about, because
Okay.
realtors don't care.
Okay.
Or GNR doesn't care. But the Tennessee Real Estate Commission cares.
Yeah.
What do you mean by wholesale?
Well, I mean, like, I'm part of groups on Facebook and stuff like that, where there's like, agent stuff, and they're like, hey, I have this assignable contract, typical thing, I paid, 120 for this, needs 30 grand in repairs, looking to assign for like, 220 because it could sell for like.
And you're going to buy it yourself on the assignment, or you're just going to sort of jump in there, put a little earnest money down, try to flip the contract?
Yeah,
and make some money?
they're assigning the
And
contract,
make some money in the
like
middle.
50 grand in the middle, yeah.
There's nothing that has to do with your real estate license that says you can't do that.
Okay. But isn't
There's not, let's put it this way. In that world, the possibilities that you and Village get sued go up dramatically.
Yeah.
But I don't know that Village has a policy. In fact, I would be surprised if, let's put it this way, I'm sure you're allowed to do it. I don't think
Okay.
it's necessarily right, but it could be lucrative.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I know. It's, just remember one thing about that is you're not selling the property, you're selling a contract.
Yeah.
It's different. So there's a lot, you have to know how to do that with the paperwork and everything for compliance. There's a certain way to do that sort of takes some of the liability off, but you sort of have to you do have to know how to do that with the paperwork involved.
Yeah.
Because if you're not the seller and you take something under assignment to try to flip it, all you're selling is a piece of paper. You're not really selling a property.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing that gets hard for people to wrap their head around is they think they're still selling the property. They're not. They're just selling the contract that they got from somebody selling the property. And you can't put them in real tracks.
Yeah.
Because real tracks only allows you to sell property. They don't allow you to sell contracts in real tracks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but no, liability goes up a lot. If the end buyer winds up buying that off the contract you sign and the whole thing turns out to be crap and it goes to court, you're going to be in the middle of it.
Yeah, sure.
Just because you sold paper doesn't mean you're not going to be sued for the property.
Okay.
So it's a pretty dangerous thing to do. Are you a member of REIN?
Yeah, things like
Yeah,
that.
they're horrible.
Oh,
they have no morals, they have no
Yeah, no
ethics.
scruples.
They're just like some of the most evil people in
Dude.
real estate. I was a member once until I realized I couldn't shower it off
I was
afterwards.
like, I'm more wise. I've seen a lot of that. I've been like,
No, I
wow,
would try to avoid those people as much as possible.
I'm more like just take a list of names.
That's
and
fine.
a list of names. of
Yeah,
people that-
no, that's they're really horrible people.
All right, well, we're out of time, and this was just the last thing I was going to show and see, actually, John, what your commentary on this is when you see the ratio of claims made of buyers versus others.
Oh, that makes perfect sense to
Now,
me.
I have my theory on this. Why do you think there's so many more buyers than anyone else?
Well, because the buyers aren't necessarily happy with the deal they got for some reason, and they figure suing somebody is a good way out of it. I mean, the sellers, what are they going to do? File a complaint with the buyer, I guess? I mean, that doesn't really make sense. So, this is not classified other, I would say probably is some sort of buyer too. But most of the, back to what I said, most of these lawsuits and E&O claims come down from buyers buying properties that have been rehabbed or have water intrusion problems, the two main issues here, or structural problems. So it's totally, it makes perfect sense that the vast majority of these claims would be buyers.
All right, guys.
That doesn't surprise me in the least.
All right. We're out.